and welcome to the Energy Talk podcast. My name is Olubumi Olajide, and I really appreciate you joining us again this week. So, I have some explaining to do. It's been about 3 weeks since the last episode, and the last episode was 3 weeks before the other episode we've uploaded, so the upload schedule has been a bit patchy. Usually I don't talk about my personal life on the podcast. I try to keep it very clean so you can learn about energy every week, but as you obviously know, it's human beings that make this podcast, and I haven't been isolated from the issues that have been happening around us. So COVID-19 last year and also this year hit my family and myself personally very hard, and it's been taxing a lot mentally, like I'm sure it has been for a lot of you listening right now. And so it's been quite a lot of work, and thankfully things are getting better for myself and my family. Not exactly perfect. There's been a lot of stress for me mentally. So last year I was trying to do a lot of things, and obviously my plans, as probably your plans, got interfered with through the pandemic. And I was trying to decide after my contract ended for my last job if I was going to go get my master's degree or to start a new job. And I was very privileged to be able to get the new role I have and to work on a project that I really enjoy. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that this podcast has been so successful. So to everybody who has listened to the podcast, to everybody who has downloaded the podcast, thank you so much. Whether this is your first episode, your second episode, or if you have been here from the beginning, I really, really appreciate every single one of you. Also, just to say this, it's been a tough couple of months and years, the last 2 years especially for all of us. So don't be afraid to take a break when you need it. Not everybody would understand, but your mental health is extremely important. So check up on yourself, I think very important, and your family as well, your friends. So this episode, to be honest, was supposed to be uploaded on Women's Day. This is an episode that I've been looking forward to for a very long time. Mervin is somebody that I admire a lot personally, her strength of character and how she's been able to overcome the challenges in her career. As you would hear, she is quite an inspiration, and the beauty about this episode is it's always going to be good advice wherever you hear it, and just hearing about how she's persevered through her career track is going to help you realize that, although the challenges may be different, we still have to overcome, and I'm confident that we will. This has been a particularly long intro. So there's just something else I want to say before I wrap this up. A large percentage of our listener base is in India, and I'm sure if you've been following the news recently, you know that the country has faced a lot of challenges dealing with the pandemic. So Isha, shout out to Isha, she's helping put together a list of organizations and charities you can donate to help them, from things as helping to get medical supplies or to just get groceries for families that have lost their income largely due to the pandemic. So please give back if you can. And to all our Indian listeners out there that have been affected by this in a more personal way, we're all here for you, and we hope things get better. If there's anything I can do at all, please do reach out. I'm always open to help out in any way I can. And so that will all be in the show notes of the episode. Please do check it out and give if you can, if you're able to. And let's listen to this episode with Mervin, and let's learn about what it's like being a woman in a very technical field, and let's go back to learning about energy, a topic that you can tell that I obviously love quite a lot. So I'm sorry for the rant, and I'm sorry for getting all personal in this episode intro, but I truly appreciate all of you, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this podcast. My name is Mervin Azeta, and I'm a product and service delivery manager at Schlumberger. I'm specifically responsible for driving operational excellence, customer satisfaction, employee engagement, as well as business development for two business lines within the production systems division, and my scope covers Nigeria and West Africa. So I joined Schlumberger in 2011, so pretty much 9+ years now. And I always wanted to address some of the problems that we have in the energy industry. I was particularly clear on what I wanted to do. So that sort of set off my career choices and, just informing the decisions that I made as to what course of study I would take up at university. So I did chemical engineering at the University of Benin for about 5 years. As you probably know, it's 5 years in Nigeria. And then once I completed that, I went on for my national service and I had my eyes on the oil and gas industry because clearly the oil and gas industry was very important for the nation and was a great route into the energy industry in general. So I completed my national service and obviously applied to Schlumberger and got invited to do the interview. And then I started off my career. With time, I decided it was necessary for me to take up a master's course of study because, again, I knew that beyond oil and gas, there was more to the energy industry, and I wanted to get a sense of all that was happening outside oil and gas. So I went on to study for a sustainable energy futures degree at Imperial College London after about 3 years working with Schlumberger. And once that was done, I came back to Schlumberger to continue my career, but more importantly, influencing some of the conversations around the energy transition within Schlumberger and outside in the wider energy industry as well. I hope that's clear
Okay.
enough.
Yes, that is something you didn't mention was the multitude of awards you've won for your work. And I think it's easier to focus on the most recent one, which was the Rising Star Award that was organized by ExxonMobil LNG. So congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you so much.
And also, I would like to talk about your work with the World Energy Council, where you sit on the board of the Future Energy Leaders Program. So, what does that particular organization try to solve, and what's your unique involvement with that?
So the World Energy Council is really just shaping the conversations around the energy transition and just making sure that every key stakeholder understands what the energy transition is really about and how each individual stakeholder could be playing to drive the conversation forward or to drive progress as much as possible on that transition. And beyond just having the conversation at high level, they're also trying to engage young people because, again, you can't possibly discuss the future of the energy sector without including young people. You can't discuss the future of the world without engaging young people. So the World Energy Council was quite visionary and pragmatic in creating the Future Energy Leaders program so that young people could sit at the table, could share their own insights and ideas and fresh perspectives on where the energy transition was going and how each stakeholder could accelerate progress on there. And so it just creates that opportunity for us to, add our voices to the conversation or discuss on the energy transition and particularly create change in our different spheres of influence or different areas of operation or different continents and countries.
And speaking of areas of operation, I want to ask about what was your early influence getting into Schlumberger when you did? Because right from your undergraduate degree, you were very aware of the energy challenge that the world was facing and where that left the oil and gas industry. For your undergraduate final project, you actually did publish something on solar storage technology. So you were very aware of the need of the grain off-grid sector and how climate change really played into the conversation. So what were your motivations and how have those motivations started to adapt now?
Okay, so I usually would talk about my experience as a kid, especially at the age of 8, where I had to lose an aunt because of power failure, right? And so that got me asking a lot of questions. You probably seen that in some of the interviews I've done in the past. So I got asking questions: what's wrong with our energy generation and supply system in Nigeria? How can we address these power cuts that we continue to have? Why is it that we can't necessarily have 24/7 electricity in Nigeria? So all of that got me, curious about the energy industry, and I started to, get very, very interested with time and with some of the experiences I was having getting into university. And as I got into university, I realized there was just so much we could do, but of course, you needed to have knowledge. And then eventually, I realized as well that we couldn't possibly have the best solutions if we were only engaging a part of the population, which again was, male engineers or scientists or whatever, there was a gap for women as well. And I wanted to address that. So bringing women into the conversation so that when you're designing some of the solutions, you're actually thinking about how sensitive to gender they were and how this could influence women's participation going forward in the industry. So I wanted to tackle some of those challenges, and that's been the motivation for me. So really just working on energy poverty and scaling energy access, addressing the gender inequalities in the sector, encouraging more women to get involved. Because as well, I'd had issues with, you know, the perception around how engineering or STEM disciplines were very tough for women and women couldn't really progress in those careers. And I just wanted to bust those myths and stereotypes. So it was a mission for me, right? Tackling the
Hmm.
energy access challenge as well as pursuing the gender conversation and also scaling STEM education for young women and girls. So it's intersectional in some way, and that's why I tend to call myself an intersectional advocate, because I'm trying to address a couple of things that intersect. So really
Yeah.
that has been the motivation for me, those three challenges I wanted to address, because I know there's not a chance that you can actually fix the energy problems without necessarily getting women involved, getting women sitting at the table and sharing their own perspectives about what you're trying to design or build or deploy, and making sure that the solutions are both inclusive and sustainable in the end.
So I actually want to paint a picture here because I realize that not all of the audience is familiar with what the oil and gas service industry does and exactly what you had to do. And when you talk about the challenges and breaking into the sector, so they might not fully appreciate that. So I
Yeah.
think it's best if you paint like a picture of what your early career was like working as a field engineer and how that really, because it's really conceived as a very physically demanding and male oriented job. And that's the perception that goes into the sector. So what was it like in your early career, and what was it like really being, in most cases, I'm going to guess you were the only female in the room, the only woman in the room?
So it was pretty challenging. But again, there's this mantra that I've always had with me, and it's really about knowing your why and pursuing it irrespective of what you face, right? So I knew where I wanted to get, I knew what I wanted to do. So, irrespective of how challenging it was for me at the time, I was ready to go through it and just pay the price. So, starting off in Schlumberger, I had to, be in the workshop, make up some very interesting equipment. Some of them are transcend technologies, very innovative technologies that you have to deploy in the well to produce oil and gas. And produce it not just the way anyone would want to produce it, but particularly safely, efficiently, and reliably. So those technologies had to be in the ground for as long as possible with minimal interventions through the life of the well. So I would go into the workshop as a completions engineer, think about the completions design that we've made for that particular well. So in Nigeria, you would have designs that are very specific to sand phase completion. And when I say sand phase completion, it's really around technologies or solutions that would interface very closely with the reservoir. So my completions technology could be screens. So screens are practically filters that help you prevent sand from being produced alongside the oil and gas. Or you'd have packers, equipment that you're using to anchor whatever technology you want to run below. So they give you some sort of stability in the well and anchorage and some isolation as well, separating the reservoir from the top section of the well. So different technologies. You could have formation isolation valves, which help you isolate the well as well once you want to do something above the well and you don't want any interactions with the bottom section or any damage to the formation. So these technologies are designed somewhere in a manufacturing center abroad. They're brought into Nigeria, and we have to prepare them into very long assemblies. Sometimes the assemblies are as long as 60 to 90 feet, and we have to prepare all of this in the shop, test them, be sure that they're going to perform once you deploy them into the well, and then you mobilize the equipment to the well. So prior to mobilization, you have to go into the shop, you have to make up some of this equipment, you have to test them. All of that required somebody going in as well, taking a pipe wrench and making up this equipment. So I had to take up pipe wrench and work on these things as well, using screwdrivers, you know, putting threads together, putting sealants in between threads just to make sure that you don't have any disconnection whatsoever. So once you're done with the makeup, testing, assembly, all of that, especially according to the standard operating procedures, maintaining quality across every stage of the preparation. You mobilize this equipment to the field in massive baskets and you get on the field. So you go to the field with a chopper or you go with a boat, it could be anything, or you go by road. And so we get on the field, we have to make sure that our equipment arrived safely and in good quality, and then we discuss with the company man. Company man is the guy who is in charge of the rig, representing the IOC or the independent company that is producing the well or producing the oil and gas from that field. We have some interactions, be sure and clear about what their objectives are with respect to the well that they're trying to complete. And then we deploy the equipment or technology into their wells, right? Make sure it
Mm-hmm.
is installed right, it is tested and it's functional, everything is good. There is no chance that there will be unexpected discharge of oil and gas whatsoever. Everything has to be as per design. So once that's completed, the well is produced for a few tests and it's good to go, we leave the field. So a lot of times, like you said, I was probably the only female out there on the rig, and I used to have comments like, what are you doing here? You should not be here. This is not a place for young women like you. This is not a place for pretty girls, for example. They tell me you should be modeling rather than being here, things like that. But again, like I said earlier, I knew what I wanted to do. I had an eye for fixing energy problems. So I really just needed to have that technical background, support for whatever conversations I'll be having. So I wouldn't go to those seats and tables and just talk out of, theory. I'd seen it happen in the field. I know what was happening out there and I can constructively contribute to the conversation at hand, right? So it was very
Mm-hmm.
interesting for me. Again, like I said, it was challenging. A lot of times I'm probably the only girl. I have to deal with sleeping in the room with guys that are not my brothers, that are not my relatives. I have to deal with, interacting with people that I probably don't want to talk to. Because again, you don't want to be on the field and be the loner or the spoil sport. You have to interact somewhat. Sometimes it's not something I want to do. I just want to be by myself, but then I have to be out and interact. So all of that, and it can be really difficult sometimes. I know some girls have had to step away from the field because they just couldn't deal with the stress and the demands out there. But there are still a lot more girls who have, waded through those challenges and they're doing exploits wherever they are. So for me, it was really around making sure that I can wade through. I can share my experiences for others. I can inspire more women and girls to pursue those sort of careers and do great things in the industry.
Thank you for painting such a great picture, and I think that really brings the audience to where we are in this conversation. So now we can talk about why you've put so much of your effort into this representation for women in industry, and why a strong part of everything you do is trying to encourage young girls to pursue STEM degrees and really get engaged in the sector.
So, like I told you, right, there's not a chance that we could have inclusive solutions and very sustainable solutions if we're sidelining or ignoring a huge part of the population, right? So, you have 50% of the population today are females. And so, if you're building solutions for a sustainable world, you need to get them involved. You need to get them in those conversations as well. And so, it's very important that we make that known in as many conversations that we get involved in. I think it's really important. And that's why I'm very excited about what we're doing at the initiative at the African Union Commission that is driving gender responsiveness in infrastructure and energy development across Africa. Women have to be a part of it. Women have to make their voices known. Otherwise, whatever infrastructure we build and develop and deploy across the continent, across the world, they would not be fit for purpose for women, and then they would not represent women very well. So we need to get women involved in these things. And how do we get them involved? Is making sure that they're encouraged to pursue STEM disciplines, even from kids, even from being children, start inspiring such interest in them so they see opportunities for them to make great changes around the world and catalyze, sustainable development for the world as well.
And I think you serve as a very good example and role model for this change in perception that you're advocating for. Just to talk more about how everything is going to play out for the future with the energy transition, especially in Africa, there's an article you published on LinkedIn where you itemize three key factors that I just want to like bring up to the audience and then we can talk about. So you brought up technology, policy, and leadership. And really like those three key points because the way they just encompass a lot of different conversation topics and they really start the conversation going. So I just want you to talk about those 3 points and generally about the energy transition in Africa and how prepared are we for it? What are the barriers we have towards it? And how can we really take advantage of this and not get further left behind us than the rest of the world?
So for technology, I feel like a lot of conversations around the energy transition would normally focus on a few technologies. And it disturbs me because today we know that no technology is a winner. There's not a chance that we could very easily pursue just one technology and actually achieve the net zero future that we desire. So we need to avoid, taking sides with any particular technology. We need to make sure that we exploit diverse energy sources and technologies to meet the demand for energy across the world, knowing fully well that population growth is out there. It's important. The population is not decreasing, it's increasing instead. And so we need to meet the energy demands for this increasing population. And we can't particularly meet that demand by focusing solely on solar, for example, or wind. In Nigeria, as much as we have massive potential to deploy a lot of solar technologies, there are still areas in the country where we cannot deploy those. And so we need to think about what technologies are applicable in those particular areas and adopt them. As long as we're mindful of the fact that they could be impactful on the environment and we're making efforts to reduce their impact on the environment. That's one. So we need to look at a bunch of technologies beyond solar and wind. We need to think about, smart electrification. We need to think about mobility as well. We need to think about deploying energy storage technologies to help us with flexibility, and the intermittency of this other technology, solar and wind, for example. We need to think about AI technologies and robotics. All of those needs to be incorporated or integrated into the conversation. We can't leave them out. In terms of policies, we know that policies are enablers for any particular development, whether it's in Africa or anywhere else in the world. So we need to make sure that we're developing very, very concrete policy actions that would help us scale some of the deployments that we want to see on the continent. So in terms of infrastructure, in terms of capacity development, we need to develop policies that support those and deliver affordable, clean, and sustainable energy for everyone, irrespective of where you are on the continent. And then, of course, leadership. It's very important that we have the right people in place, thinking through what policy frameworks and instruments or whatever other initiatives are needed to engage the different stakeholders and to deliver the transformation that we want to see. Those three things are particularly important and we cannot miss them. And I'm sure
And
you also saw the part where I added the gender bit. It's also very important that women are engaged in these conversations so that whatever we're building, whatever we're designing and deploying are actually fit for purpose and they serve everyone alike. So it's equal, it's fit for purpose, it's sustainable.
yes, definitely. And I actually want to bring everything you've just mentioned and just give a practical case study. So I'd like to use your employer, Schlumberger, for this case study. So we could actually put a quick disclaimer for this section of the conversation if you don't want to speak on behalf of Schlumberger. But you spent almost 10 years with the company now, and you've risen through various stages of roles and responsibilities, and you've grown quite a lot with the company. And the company is one of those that have to transition with the energy sector because it's in the energy service industry, and it has to redefine its product lines and look at how it's going to fit into the future of this whole global conversation. So how do you see that really playing out in a real world case for now?
Okay, so Schlumberger, just like most other companies in the oil and gas industry, understand that they have to, change. They have to reimagine the future. They have to change the way they do things right now. And so they're positioning themselves for that, right? Within Schlumberger, and just like you had mentioned, I'm not necessarily speaking for Schlumberger, but just giving you an insight into how things are playing out in the company. It acknowledges that the world is moving. It acknowledges that there is a transition to a cleaner, resilient, and a sustainable energy future. And it can't possibly remain the way it's always operated or the way it's always been. Anyone who fails to adapt definitely would die, right? We know that clearly. So it's adapting, and it's doing that by transforming its organizational structure. It's had to become leaner and more integrated. It's had to divest into newer technologies. It's investing a lot in technologies like carbon capture and storage, lithium ion batteries, and lithium storage technologies. It's pivoting as well to develop technologies in geothermal and a lot of these new technologies that are coming up. It's also collaborating with digital companies like tech companies to develop digital platforms that will enable the transition from a traditional oil and gas company to a more integrated energy company. So as you've probably heard, big oil is becoming big energy, and not just big energy, but big energy plus data, because a lot of the
Yeah.
data that we've collected over time will be useful for developing newer solutions, will be useful for, scaling some of the solutions that we have today, and even driving transformation across different other sectors where we're not necessarily playing right now or we're not necessarily playing before now, right?
Yes. And on that note, actually, I would just like to ask, kind of as a final question to this interview, for your advice on several things. So, especially to the female audience that this episode is definitely going to attract, you mentioned a lot about the new skills and the new technologies that will be relevant to the energy transition and the energy companies of the future, what they look for in terms of hiring. A lot of young people, whether they're coming out of school right now, they're in a very precarious position where there are less opportunities and people are not really have a lot of certainty in terms of what their future is. So what advice do you have for people, especially for young girls, and what skills would you advise them to focus on building, and what kind of mindset and attitudes would be very beneficial to really take advantage of the energy transition?
Thank you so very much. I love that you asked that question because, interestingly, I had a conversation around this a few days ago, and it's really important that we keep these conversations going. So, as the industry is adapting, so employees would adapt, so future workforce needs to adapt, and we need to make sure that our educational systems are designed in such a way that they equip students with future ready skills to tackle the new realities that we're seeing, tackle some of the new challenges that will crop up eventually as we move into the new transition, into the new world order, and then make sure that students also stay relevant, or employees or the workforce stays relevant as we progress through this transition. There's been a demand for technological skills as we've seen lately in the industries around the world, not just the oil and gas industry, for example. We've seen that, they need people with advanced analytic skills, being able to analyze data and to leverage that information for creating new solutions or innovative solutions. There's been a demand as well for high level social and emotional skills, having young people take initiative, be very critical about what you're trying to do. Critical thinking and decision making is really important. Resilience, because again, this is not the only crisis we would see in our time or lifetime. We will see another crisis. How do you wade through the crisis and emerge stronger and more creative to fix some of the challenges that you see? Being adaptable, because times will always change. We are in an industry that is very cyclical, that is very prone to a lot of changes. So we need to be adaptable, being able to change when we need to change, and not stay stuck in our old ways of thinking and doing. So a lot of this we need to see come through in some of the applicants to the jobs that we have. And if we don't see them coming through, it's difficult for us to engage those kind of people, right? So it's really important that young people, whether it's female or male, you come to the employment table with a mindset that you're coming to create value, you're coming to help the industry address some of the challenges it's facing. We don't want people to just come in and just sit and just tag along, or just go with the flow. We need people who can disrupt things. We need people who can change the status quo. And you approach those jobs with the mindset to create and deliver value, not just for your company as well, but thinking through, sustainability. How do you deliver value to every other stakeholder? How do you develop solutions that will continue to be relevant, or that will be, dated and modified to just continue to meet the needs of the industry and the world? And students have to come with really good skill set. It can't be just technical skills only. It has to be a balanced skill set of technical, soft skills, human skills, people skills, all of those, right?
Yes, definitely. And you are in a very unique situation where you've managed to not just have a great career and a great job, but you've had to it integrates very nicely to your own personal values and what you're really passionate about. So I'm just curious, is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience that we haven't already covered in the interview so far?
I tell my mentees and anyone who cares to hear that we have to believe in our dreams. People would say you're crazy, you don't know what you're thinking, all of that. Don't get bogged down by those things. Don't get bogged down as well by the only female narrative. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter whether you're the only female or not. Change has to happen. Progress needs to be made. So you keep going or you get out, right? So be very clear about what you want to do and go for it. Don't let negativity stop you. And embrace your uniqueness. That you're the only female in a place means that you're there to create change, you're there to make a difference. So make sure that you do that. Don't get carried away by the excitement or the hype of being the only female or the only young woman in the room. Know your whys. I think the whys are really important. Know why you're there. Because again, if you know your why, you can bear almost anyhow, like the German philosopher once said. So it would help you understand the choices that you make. It would help you stay focused on the path that you take. It would help you remain determined to wade through challenges with grit and resilience and, character. And you wouldn't necessarily be distracted by things that may happen, or the changes that may come through, or the disruptions that may come through as well, as we've seen during this COVID-19 pandemic and all the things that it brought. So it's really important that you stay grounded. And one thing I always say as well is that never underestimate the power of your voice. Sometimes it's okay to keep quiet. Some of the time it's not okay. You have to speak up, because who knows, you just might have the solution that we're all looking for, or you just might have some wisdom that would help us make progress on every project or program that we're trying to pursue.
That's very excellently said. Mervin, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. This has been very well worth the wait, and thank you for making time for this interview.
It's a pleasure, Olubumi, and I like what you're doing. I hope that you keep blooming in whatever you do, and just keep creating sparkles on energy around the world.
Thank you so much.